Welcome back to another episode of the Wellness Digest. Today, we're going to talk about the hidden fire, how your gut drives low-grade inflammation throughout the body. Did you know that one of the biggest drivers of fatigue, premature aging, and chronic disease is something that you often can't pinpoint to specifically a feeling or one activity? It's called low-grade inflammation, and in many cases, it starts in the gut. Low-grade inflammation for so many of us has become a new normal, and it's not because of a single event, one specific thing we're doing. It's just because of how we're living. Chronic stress, processed foods, poor sleep habits, and environmental toxins all contribute to this low-grade inflammation throughout our body. So today, we will unpack what is low-grade inflammation actually. Why is it a real concern, even for people in, their 20s and 30s, and how the gut drives inflammation in this process? And most importantly, of course, what you can do to calm this fire within. And before we dive into that, I just want to say it's just me today. Lena, who's usually here with me, is sitting this one out, but she will be back soon. So let's start with, why should we even care about inflammation in general, or this low-grade inflammation term that I was just starting to talk about? So first and foremost, low-grade inflammation in today's world is recognized as a major driver behind nearly every chronic disease out there. That's including heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and even autoimmune conditions. It's so pervasive that researchers often call it the common denominator of chronic disease. I like to think of it as having a tiny spark of fire or smoldering somewhere in your house. It's not enough that your fire alarm kicks in, but it's just kind of there, slowly eating away at your foundation. To start this off, let's look at some key statistics, because when I really started digging into this, I was shocked to learn about some of these. First and foremost, 60% of global deaths are linked to chronic inflammatory diseases like heart disease, strokes, diabetes, and cancer. In the US population, studies suggest that 20 to 40% of adults show measurable signs of low-grade inflammation, even if they appear healthy otherwise, or even if they say they're feeling healthy. Higher inflammation scores increase the risk of developing multiple chronic diseases by 36% and accelerate disease onset. And again, those are diseases like heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune condition, and even cognitive decline, as you see in Alzheimer's. And to also make this a little bit about women's health, women with PCOS frequently present with elevated markers of chronic inflammation, such as C-reactive protein, IL-6, and TNF-alpha. And it is estimated that insulin resistance affects 65 to 80% of PCOS patients, with inflammation playing a key role in that relationship. So, the main takeaway here, low-grade inflammation is invisible, but it can be really pervasive and persistent. You may not necessarily feel sick, like it's not like you have a cold or a flu and those symptoms as what's causing your immune system to be on overdrive, but it's this like low, sluggish feeling. You're feeling tired, puffy, moody, brain foggy, and that's because of that low-grade inflammation that's really impacting so many different systems and processes in your body. So now that we covered why we should care about low-grade inflammation, let's dive a little bit more into what it actually is. So just to set the baseline, inflammation in itself is a very natural and normal process of our body and our immune system. It signals to our body, hey, something is wrong here. So in the event when you have a cold, a flu, or a cut that's getting infected and inflamed, that's your body's immune system saying, hey, body, please pay attention, something is going on here. And that, when the immune system gets activated there, that is also an inflammatory process. But in this case, it kind of activates your healing properties. The problem is when this inflammatory state becomes persistent or chronic. And that's essentially what we're seeing with low-grade chronic inflammation. It's a persistent, mild activation of the immune system that never fully turns off. And this is when essentially your immune system is constantly on high alert. And that can lead to some of these things that we talked about, including, fatigue, premature aging, and essentially also be the starting point to many of these chronic diseases that we're seeing in today's world. Again, I like to bring it back to an analogy. You can think about in this case as a burner on your stove that's on low all day long. It's just kind of simmering on low without really having a real purpose, and it's slowly destroying your pan or your pot. So, what are the main triggers? First and foremost, modern lifestyle. Processed foods, inflammatory foods like alcohol, sugar, those really increase inflammation, especially in our gut. Chronic stress, lack of sleep or poor sleep habits, sedentary behavior, so just not moving enough, sitting a lot, that creates a lot of stress for our body, environmental toxins that we're exposed to, toxins in our food and water, and also a disrupted gut microbiome. And this is where, to me, when I was really diving into this is where a lot of the pieces of the puzzle connected. The gut is such a huge driver of chronic inflammation in our body. And understanding that is so empowering because it really can help us hone in on what are the tactical steps we can take to help reduce that inflammation throughout. So let's talk about how the gut and low-grade inflammation are so closely intertwined. First and foremost, our gut is one of our first defense systems when things enter our body. So think about it this way. Anything that we ingest through our mouth travels into our digestive system. And our digestive system is essentially a gatekeeper to decide what gets into the body and what is taken out. That's also why such a big portion of our immune system is located in the gut. So when our gut is inflamed because we're eating these processed foods and inflammatory foods like sugar and alcohol, that is essentially a first way of how we can disrupt our immune system and increase that inflammation throughout. Second, and just as important, our gut barrier. Because of the way that our gut is a gatekeeper to what gets into the body, the gut barrier is so important in deciding what actually gets absorbed into our bloodstream from what enters our body and what gets excreted. When the body is healthy and when our gut barrier is strong, this gut barrier, you can imagine it like a wall of dominoes. It's like very tightly stacked. And one fascinating fact that I didn't know until I really started learning more about the gut microbiome and our intestines is that our gut barrier is 1 cell thick, which means it's extremely thin when comparing it to other barriers that we have in the body. So when our gut microbiome is out of balance, when we're stressed, when we're eating these processed foods, when we have inflammation in our gut, that gut barrier essentially breaks apart. You can envision it like little dominoes, just kind of one falling out. And that allows substances to leak into the bloodstream that we really don't want there, which essentially creates an immune response, activates your immune system, and is a driver and starting point for this low-grade inflammation that starts through the leaky gut, in your gut, but essentially then spreads throughout the body. Next, another part of this leaky gut is there's a specific set of compounds called lipopolysaccharides. Those are toxins that our body detects. And when those lipopolysaccharides, in a healthy gut, these lipopolysaccharides, or LPS as we call them, they get collected and excreted with our bowel movements. When the gut becomes leaky, these LPS are allowed to basically leak back into our bloodstream, which also exacerbates this inflammation throughout our body. Science has shown that these LPS are one of the strongest known immune activators. Even tiny amounts can set off inflammation in the body, and then it takes quite a while to calm that back down. Secondly, I just kind of mentioned it already, this idea of dysbiosis. So when our gut is healthy and when our gut bacteria are balanced, they are working together to keep our gut barrier strong, keep inflammation low, get those toxins and other waste products out of our body through our bowel movements, and everything is working in harmony. When the gut microbiome gets disrupted and out of balance, that's what we call dysbiosis. So that means we have less of the good bacteria that are helping with these processes that keep us healthy, and potentially more of unwanted or harmful bacteria or yeasts that are starting to overgrow. This process, or the state of your gut, is called dysbiosis. And we know that, again, going back to these lifestyle factors that we talked about earlier, lifestyle factors like processed foods, chronic stress, lack of sleep, those all contribute to these imbalances in our gut microbiome and can actively contribute to dysbiosis. And so dysbiosis also triggers inflammation. When our gut is out of balance in dysbiosis, inflammation goes along. And again, that inflammation starts in the gut, but because our gut is such a big part of the immune system, and because usually when we have inflammation in the gut barrier also becomes leaky. This is all just a vicious cycle of just creating inflammation in the gut, which then eventually spreads as inflammation throughout our system. And again, this is a main driver of chronic low-grade inflammation. And lastly, some of our most important good gut bacteria, like bifidobacteria, they're extremely important in helping produce anti-inflammatory compounds, such as short-chain fatty acids that support our intestinal health as well as our immune balance. And one thing that I found really interesting when I was doing this research is that there was a review in Nature Reviews Immunology in 2024 that called the gut microbiome the most influential environmental regulator of inflammation. So again, it called it the most influential environmental regulator of inflammation, essentially meaning that the gut is essential in helping us regulate inflammation in the body, but that also means if it's not regulated, it can drive inflammation throughout our body. Lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the stress connection to the gut. So we know that stress hormones, especially cortisol, increase inflammation in the gut, impact our gut microbiome, and actually can increase our likelihood of getting leaky gut. So, again, kind of going back to these lifestyle factors earlier on, the more we're stressed, and let's be honest, who isn't stressed these days, the more we're also contributing to low-grade chronic inflammation that starts in the gut and then kind of spreads throughout the body. And this is also why stress and sleep deprivation can trigger gut issues for many, and why gut issues can heighten anxiety, fatigue, brain fog, and a lot of these things that are more connected to our mental state. So now that we know how important a healthy and balanced gut microbiome is to keep those inflammation levels low throughout our body, we're of course also going to talk about what you can do on a daily basis as small habits throughout the day to help support a healthy gut microbiome. Number one, feeding your gut microbiome. So one of the most powerful things you can do is to support and essentially feed your good gut bacteria so they can thrive and keep your gut healthy and balanced, even if your modern lifestyle and external stressors are kind of putting stress on your gut. The two most effective way for doing this, number one, eating a really balanced diet that includes a lot of prebiotics and fibers, because fiber, which you can find in legumes, whole grains, cruciferous veggies like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, asparagus, etc., that's what's feeding our good gut bacteria. So again, a very balanced, nutritious diet, especially with a lot of fiber, can really help support a healthy gut microbiome. Secondly, incorporating a high-quality probiotic into your daily wellness routine can be so supportive for helping keeping your gut microbiome balanced, supporting a strong gut barrier, and helping to keep that inflammation low. My two favorite products for this in particular is number one, Omnibiotic Stress Release. We know that Omnibiotic Stress Release has shown in clinical studies to reduce inflammation in the intestines and to strengthen the gut barrier. And on top of that, because of how important stress or stress management is for also keeping inflammation low in our gut, Omnibiotic Stress Release works on that gut-brain connection so that we can overall be more resilient to stress in our lives. And my second favorite product is Omnibiotic Detox, which was specifically formulated for the gut-liver connection and to support metabolic health and liver health and detoxification pathways. But we also know that the probiotic strains in Omnibiotic Detox support a strong gut barrier and support those elimination processes in our body. Again, helping to keep everything working, supporting detoxification and keeping inflammation low throughout. And we also know that Omnibiotic Detox in clinical studies has shown to reduce some of these circulating toxins in the body that we just talked about, which are also activating the immune system and increase inflammation throughout. So those are my two favorites for that. If you're not sure where to start, we also have the Omnibiotic Gut Health Reset Program, which is a 3-month program also designed to really restore and rebuild your gut kind of from the beginning. It has month 1, Omnibiotic AB10 to get really restoration in the gut and get some of these unwanted, potentially harmful pathogens out. In month 2, it's omnibiotic stress release that really focuses on reducing the inflammation in your gut and strengthening your gut barrier. And then in month 3, it's omnibiotic balance, which really helps balance your immune system so that you can be back in this kind of like more harmonious state of immune function in your body. We already talked about this, but a strong gut barrier is critical for keeping inflammation low in your gut and throughout your body. So in addition to taking a probiotic like we just talked about, there's also some other really helpful targeted supplements that can help support a strong barrier. Some of these include omega-3s, zinc, L-glutamine, and polyphenols to really, help support the strong gut barrier and keep inflammation low. Especially if we're talking about the gut barrier, it's also really important to keep things out of your gut that increase your risk for inflammation. And those are processed foods, alcohol, refined sugars, and also refined oils, just to name a few. And now we're back to my topic of managing stress and sleep. As we talked about earlier, stress can increase inflammation in the gut and in the body, especially if the stress is persistent or chronic. Often stress also goes along with poor sleep and poor sleep habits, which just exacerbates this vicious cycle of increased stress, which compromises our gut microbiome, it compromises our gut barrier and increases inflammation throughout our body. So working on managing your stress through mindfulness practices, vagus nerve practices, and just really watching out for, how much you commit to on a daily basis, and then prioritizing really good quality sleep can also be extremely supportive. And then daily movement. We know that especially gentle movement like walking, yoga, Pilates helps to reduce inflammatory markers in the body, such as C-reactive protein and IL-6, both of which can also just help support overall immune balance and keeping that inflammation low. So what's the key takeaway here? Well, when you support your gut, you're supporting so much more than just digestion. It's really a dial that helps you dial down and turn down that systemic inflammation throughout your body. So that brings us to the end of this episode on low-grade chronic inflammation and how the gut is really involved in this. Let me just do a quick recap. So first and foremost, low-grade inflammation is the silent fire behind so many modern health issues, and it's not something that just hits us when we're in our 50s and 60s. Many people even in their 20s and 30s are showing these signs of low-grade inflammation because of our modern lifestyle and our processed foods and the toxins we're exposed to. The gut is at the core of this cascade of low-grade inflammation that often starts in the gut and then spreads throughout our body. Because our gut barrier is so essential for supporting inflammation and immune system balance, and because so much of our immune system originates in the gut. And I like to think of it as the gut being both the spark that can spark this low-grade inflammation throughout our body and also part of the solution. It's actually really hard to work on low-grade inflammation in your body without addressing the gut. And lastly, supporting our gut through food, lifestyle practices, a good probiotic, and stress management can be really, really powerful in helping tone down and reduce that inflammation throughout your body, and especially because you're doing it naturally. So, as a final thought, I leave you with this. What if the secret to aging well and feeling vibrant wasn't about doing more, but about calming what's already burning beneath the surface? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Wellness Digest. Let us know what you think. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, we're always excited to hear from you.